Welcome to the Only Male Cruise Show, the We Own Your Head podcast. Discussing topics that make you say, how and where can we improve as a society? From a Black American's perspective. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Catch us live, be ready to speak. This is a call-in show. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Let's go to work. Welcome to the Only Male Cruise Show, the podcast. I am the Only Male Cruise. We own your head. All right, so today we're having a very quick conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's dead, y'all. I think it died, okay? The numbers are out, and they're not looking good. So I've got two people that are going to come up and have this conversation with me. We're going to talk about where is it going? And a lot of people may not really be concerned about diversity, equity, inclusion, but they should be. So let's talk about, let's bring in our first guest, Dr. Deborah Jenkins, who is a political scientist, philosophical theologian, adjunct professor in the New York City area, and a restorative justice expert. Welcome, Dr. Jenkins. How are you this morning?
Hey, thank you so much for having me on your show, Mel.
Yeah.
I'm fine, and I'm glad you're having this discussion and including me in it.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy that you're here. And then also want to bring in an organizational development professional from the Midwest area, and that is Gina Bourne. Good morning, Gina. How are you?
Good morning, Mel, and good morning, Dr. Deborah. I'm doing wonderful this morning, and I'm glad to be here with the two of you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so thankful for you guys to be here because I know, we follow each other on those Twitter streets, and these numbers. I mean, Twitter's a miraculous place. The problem is Elon Musk. Okay, but we follow each other on Twitter, and so the numbers came out about DEI, and I guess it's kind of like maybe where I want to start is with the numbers and how they came out. So we're looking at these numbers are essentially showing us that DEI is really being run by white people. Okay, they're in charge, and ladies, you can chime in whenever whenever you want to, need to. But when you look at these numbers here, Black Americans don't have any power skin in the game, for the most part. Any response to that, ladies?
Well, I don't think the statistics lie. I don't know. I shouldn't have been shocked when I saw them, right? You and I discussed them, or we looked at them around the same time, and I shouldn't have been shocked because I'm actually ready to put up my shock cape because these types of statistics are consistent beyond the DEI category as it relates to the impact that we as Black people have in areas that directly influence how well we do economically and socially. So they're very consistent, but they were surprising to me. I honestly thought that it would be closer to, say, a 55-45 division, but still having white people with the advantage.
Right. I actually wasn't shocked. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I think I was more offended than anything at those numbers. And Gina, I don't know what are your thoughts on this graphic here? Any thoughts about the?
Well, I was shocked. Just based off of my experience. I'm now working for a public institution, but I have come out of the for-profit sectors, and usually the face of diversity is usually a Black female. And so I know that whereas when we are in the workplace, we're usually reporting to someone that doesn't look like us. But in terms of being the face, I quite frequently say I see more of us than I do any white women or white males. So I was quite surprised by those statistics.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's the diversity in the diversity. Because for me, this is, what I'm finding is this, I guess the reason why I wasn't necessarily shocked is because when we look at some of the programs that are being offered, some of the DEI programs and approaches, and what some of the trainings that corporations are going with to provide to their employees, they, to me now, they are not, a lot of them are not effective. They're kind of watered down, they're tempered, so much to the point where those who they're trying to reach, to me, it's not it's not reaching them. There's not a connection being made, and I believe it's because there's a passive approach to um, there's a passive approach to the topic. Shout out to Aretha Johnson. Thanks for pulling up, Aretha. We appreciate you so much. But there's a passive approach to um, presenting the issues, and so that's why those numbers, for the most part, didn't. I was like, oh man, it just that's why I guess I became incensed. But when we look at this graph here, I mean, how blatant is it that even in diversity, equity, inclusion roles, um, Black Americans' voice is still unheard? Any thoughts on that, ladies?
Yeah, I'm listening to what Gina said, and I'm thinking about two friends I know who actually do run or are part of the leadership in the DEI space within their corporations. And they are private, they're not public. But the difference, I believe, and I don't know if this would bear out for you and your experience, Regina, but they are international companies that are not headquartered here in the United States. And perhaps there is a greater value for true diversity from those corporations and the cultures of those companies. But when we get into the weeds of these numbers, perhaps it's American originating companies that lead in these areas.
Okay, that's interesting. So, yeah, I was thinking back to my days in banking. Uh, Not so much, well, a global presence, of course, but U.S. banking. And this was many years ago. And I do recall in private sector there being a much more passive, as Mel was saying, and watered down approach even back then.
Mhm.
And one of the other things that stands out for me is some of the individuals that I knew that were in these roles at the time, and I was not, were very leery about getting promoted into these positions because they knew that it was more of an approach to just to be able to say to the communities and or their consumers, their consumer base, that, hey, this is one of the things that we value is diversity. We have someone who is a chief diversity person or so on, but behind the scenes, this person was not really able to really make real change. But it was something for that corporation to be able to say that they were doing and something that they valued. But again, more along the lines of, what we say, you get into maybe global responsibilities and some of the things that these organizations say that they value, as opposed to really being impactful in the workplace and really having policies that are effective in helping to advance people of color in the workplace.
And and that's a really good point. And I think there is a clear distinction that should be made, whether it's a global organization or a just a United States organization, an American organization, um, and how they look at diversity. And I feel that, of course, one of the buzzwords or the code words are, George Floyd. That name, his name is invoked. It's like his name is invoked so that I guess I'm very skeptical. Okay, and I feel like a lot of times in company we'll hear that, we'll hear his name mentioned, and that's supposed to signal that, hey, you guys, I identify with you. But then when you look at the work that is being produced, I can't tell because the focus is not on anything Black. And that's not to say that diversity, equity, inclusion should be specific to Black Americans. That's not what I'm saying. But the issues and the causes of discomfort in the workplace, for example, the when we get to the Black Americans and those issues, somehow they don't seem to be addressed. So we'll see a lot of promotion about LGBTQ, disabilities, women, and pay gaps and whatnot. But typically, I have not seen where it's been specific to, hey, this is an issue for Black people. Here's how we can address it. It seems to be swept under the rug, and so I'm wondering, is it because if this graph here, let's see here, if this graph is indicative of why that is. Because, we don't rank anywhere in the stats as far as our concerns and our needs.
Mm-hmm.
I want to run this real quick clip. This is kind of DEI, but this is definitely an example. This is this lady, I forgot her name, but she's trying to give an explanation of what woke means. Now, woke and DEI aren't synonymous, but it is thrown into the same pot. So let's just check this video out real quick, you guys.
Americans consider themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. Sorry, it's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Yeah, look, your time.
Okay, so that's how issues specific to Black people, that's how those are discussed in the DEI realm. At least that's what I've seen. And that's not 100%. There are some white Americans who, understand how important it is, or that diversity, equity, inclusion means everyone. But the way this lady was trying to define woke, which was incorrect, by the way, but the way she was trying to define woke is the same way that the conversations go when they're trying to have discussion or lead discussions on areas specific to race. And so to me, that's what the problem is. And this is why we are where we are right now, my opinion, with DEI and it being on the chopping block everywhere. I mean, Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis, or Rick DeSantis, they're all ready to, they're banning it. They don't want it mentioned in the workplace. They don't want it mentioned in academia. No programs, cutting funding. The guy in Oklahoma, Ryan, can't remember his last name, wanted to do an audit on all of the universities. How much money are you guys spending on DEI initiatives? But who is really representing it in order to keep it alive? Do you guys understand what I'm saying there?
Absolutely. To the clip, if I might, you
Absolutely.
know, Rising was interviewing this author about her book, and the young lady who asked her to define woke, her name escapes me, but I'm so happy she did that, because if you listen clearly, she said that they included an entire chapter on what woke means, and she predicted that that clip would go viral, as it has, as it should have, because they're capitalizing off of misunderstandings. And I feel that the word woke has been co-opted by the right to again use as an attack against blackness. Like you're clearly stating that DEI goes beyond the concerns of our community exclusively. It has never been exclusively for us, certainly with us in mind, but there are those who fall under the category of the ADA. And then there are other categories as well. Of course, my chief concern is for how Black people are treated within corporations and within this country and in employment across the board. But you have people like this lady who's written a book, included a chapter equating wokeness to DEI, and has no clear understanding of what it is. And that's what makes this so dangerous. And that is, I believe, why it is a field that had great potential, but is fading away and fading away fast.
Indeed, indeed. And and her definition was, it's like her definition was what she wanted it to be. And this is where it failed, because instead of asking a Black person, hey, what is woke? What is woke? She came up with a whole new definition of it. She's saying, well, what it means is that we need to create a new oppression hierarchy. That's not what that means. We're not, when we say stay woke, we're not saying stay looking for a new oppression hierarchy. So that's not what it means at all. And this is the way topics around DEI are discussed when they are led by uninformed or misinformed individuals.
Exactly. And one of the things that I was thinking about, especially when I was thinking about what Governor DeSantis and Governor Abbott are doing, I mean, that's the very reason why we actually need DEI programming. So for them to make wokeness and DEI synonymous is dangerous. To me, these are two different things. And I look at DE&I as bringing awareness to cultural differences, and also to, after you receive that awareness, to bring it into the workplace to create, a culture that's respectful, to play off of different strengths that diverse people have, So this whole thing about it being about this hierarchy and this oppression, I just don't understand that. But I know why they're doing it. This is very political. It seems very political to me, and they don't care. I know that there have been individuals in my workplace of the white race that have said years ago that they felt very uncomfortable at a lot of these DE&I sessions. They were walking away feeling bad for being white. And I think, that is the lens at which, a lot of white conservatives are looking at it as, we can't be uncomfortable. We can't make others feel uncomfortable. So this whole thing needs to just be reversed. So, yeah, I agree with Dr. Deborah on that. I think it's very dangerous because in turn, to me, the progress that we are beginning to make, the little that we are beginning to make, it's like they would like to, again, just throw it out the window.
Right.
And I don't see how that's going to help us make any progress.
Right. And, and I will say this, some of the topics surrounding DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, they are hard topics. They are hard topics. And when you look at, the individual who is leading the conversations, are they courageous? Are they tactful? Are they jaded? Are they, do they hate? I hate, the white man. There needs to be some balance there because we can't be too over the top with it's your fault. And, there was a lawsuit that was started. I did a video on it about 4, 5, 6 months ago, where a white man in Seattle is suing the city because he was forced to participate in a DEI training, and he said that the coworkers were telling him that it's his fault that Black Americans are underclass and it's all his fault. And had they not come over here and attempted to colonize and do this and that, no one, black, white, red, brown, no one should be made to feel as though it is their fault that our country is in the predicament that it's in. Okay. No one should be made to feel guilty about it. But by the same token, people also need to understand the truth about it. And I would say that DEI doesn't necessarily go as far back or as far into CRT and all of that encompasses. But there are some tough things about DEI where those conversations need to be had. Let me put this graphic up. I found these people on LinkedIn. Harper Slade Racial Equity Advisors. Turnover due to racial inequity in the workplace may have cost U.S. organizations up to $172 billion over the past 5 years. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of raises. That's a lot of bonuses. And so, for organizations to be willing to let this kind of money and leave it on the table, it would seem to me that would be incentive enough to say, hey, how do we fix this problem? And I don't think that organizations really understand the problem. And it takes me back to this graph here. And this is why, because if the people in charge of DEI don't understand the problem, how can they create trainings? How can they create conversations that will bring about solutions? How can that happen? Or can it? Ladies, tell me what you think.
Yeah. You want to go first, Gina?
That's a very good question. How can you bring about solutions if you're not willing to be uncomfortable and face some of the realities? It's like you have to be in some sort of denial. I don't really know what the answer is to that. But like I was saying earlier, I think a lot of the experiences, at least, the conferences and things that I participate in are really evolved more around higher ed. I tend to see more of us than I do the others. And the frustrations are that the burden is on us to teach others, what these things mean. But still, where you really want the change to happen is through policy and through doing things differently, creating equitable programs in the workplace or, those type of things. And that seems to be where there is no traction, or some of these other issues will take precedence, with going back to LGBTQ and accessibility and some of the other things. But the equity in terms of opportunities for Black people seem to be pushed aside, and the other issues seem to be moved forward. And I think that's because people feel more comfortable, dealing with those issues.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I also agree with Dr. Nikki Proctor Walden said in the quote that you just pinned here. I think a part of the problem is, and I probably made this comment on my LinkedIn or something to this effect. This seems to have been an area where not a lot of thought was put into it before hiring or appointing certain individuals to head up the DE&I space at these corporations, but those people who were subsequently given these roles had no prep. They may have come from the human resources part of the company or somewhere in that sphere. And then one would have to look at their record on hiring practices. And if their hiring practices is laced with a lot of inequity as it relates to Blackness or people having disabilities, then they were not the right people to have been selected. But I believe that because we are almost 4 years, 3.5 years out from George Floyd's murder, where there was an increase in attention given to the DEI space, now people have a malaise about it. And ultimately it comes down to positions created to provide employment for white women, because many white women are in charge of human resources in these big corporations, and they end up being, by default, these DEI people, when really we should be the ones who are, quote unquote, helping them to feel comfortable and less emotional about the responses they get while in these roles. If I'm a Black person and I've been held at a position without any progress for years, or beyond the time that I see my peers being promoted, and I express that view with any level of passion, the person in this role needs to have the sensitivity towards my emotions in that state, in that case, to hear me out and then come up with a corrective action plan to help me gain progress in this corporation that I've devoted so much of my time to. I mean, that's a very basic example that I've just given, but it seems to me that more and more people who are Caucasian, who fit in with that nearly 80% of those holding these positions, are bringing their emotions into their work and not showing up to do the good work. And I think we do have to push them and make them uncomfortable in this role that they now occupy, in order for everybody who's included under the banner of being in need of relief and repair are able to get that.
And
Yeah.
Dr. Deborah, I would say that in response to that, you're absolutely right. But I think that has been the problem throughout the many years of these diversity initiatives, because I'm thinking back to the early 2000s. And I don't know if y'all remember the book, that it was by Roosevelt Thomas, I believe, and it was the giraffe and the elephant. And they talked about diversity, and it was a really, really hot topic back in maybe the early 2000s. And they were doing diversity training, and it's similar to what's happening now. And so it was like, it was trendy. It was there for a few years, then it kind of went away. And so it seems to happen whenever we have maybe some things that are devastating or detrimental to the Black community. And so it's been resurrected under George Floyd. But my thought on it is that you have people, again, you're looking at the statistics, you have these people who report to other people. In some cases, chief diversity officers may report straight to the CEO or whoever is in charge of that organization. And it's already, in the policies that this is the way we're going to do things. And DE&I is something that we say we value because it's politically correct to say that we value it. And if we have a consumer base, we want to say that these are some of the things that we value. But in terms of moving the ball, in terms of really creating development, and like you say, coming up with intervention, coming up with strategies to correct, inequity, it does not happen. And you're right, it's because they are not being pushed, but I believe it's because they can only go so far, because whoever they're reporting to or their board of directors is like, this is the way we want it.
And to me that, and I agree with both points that you ladies made. And to your last point, Gina, I believe that's because a real conversation has not occurred for the decision makers to understand what the benefit is. I just real quickly wanted to just shout out Dr. Nikki Proctor-Walden and go over some of the comments she made. You have to keep making people uncomfortable. That's the only way to make people act. Totally agree with that. Dr. Nikki is also stating that education and enlightenment is supposed to make you uncomfortable, and people who are in power see no benefit in sharing power. And it's difficult to sell those benefits unless it's their power structure idea. Total agreement with what Dr. Nikki has stated here. And that's, again, this kind of leads me back to one of my positions here, is that when you have people who are in charge of a program that they themselves do not understand, that they themselves have really no interest in seeing change, unless it's for their pet project. Oh, I'm so concerned about disabilities, which every marginalized category deserves the same amount of attention, care, and concern. But you can't say DEI and that I for inclusion and willfully and systematically and look at the numbers. This has to be intentional, that in every graph, Black Americans are at the bottom. Okay? Chief Diversity Officer wage gap by race. So even when we do get the role, look where we are. We have no juice, as it were. No matter where we are in this arena, we are not considered. However, when you get into mixed company, they will invoke the name of George Floyd to kind of signal, hey, I know why you're here. I know why you're here. So, and that is the problem. I think too that it's the fact that they don't know how to talk about our issues. I wouldn't even go so far as to say they don't care, but I would say they don't know how to talk about it. And so, kind of to Dr. Nikki's point that she made in the comments, if they don't know how to talk about it, then they need to take maybe the co-chair, the co-seat, sit in the back, but don't be in the front, because you can't lead what you don't understand.
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree. But is there patience? And I believe that has been one of the problems. They want, and when I say they, I'm talking about the corporations who have really tried to put their best foot forward by creating these departments of diversity where they didn't exist before. And even when you refer back to the early 2000s, Gina, with the Roosevelt Thomas book, it was something very novel at that time. Now it is critical to equity, right? It's critical to have these divisions within large corporations and even smaller ones, to be honest, for there to be a level of equity. But we're continuously told that because of the emotional, and I keep saying this, I want you all to understand from my perspective that when we get the pushback from those who are leading these divisions, the CODs, they are reacting or responding from a place of rejecting any responsibility for us even being here. And when I say for us, for the inequity that exists. I think it goes without saying that I'm always seeking to make life better for Black people. But when we understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion goes beyond just our plight, and there are others who are also adversely affected by the inequalities within corporations, that we have to definitely continue to push the needle. But what we find, and what has been codified by others beyond this article that we're reviewing today, is that anti-Blackness still exists, and at high levels. You just put up one of the articles responding to how corporations have lost at least $172 billion because of a lack of diversity, because of the racial inequity. But then we also have to talk about the pay disparity, right? We know we're not going to even get into us as Black women being the most educated in this country, still earning less than all of our counterparts, all of them. But Black people in general, the pay inequity is astronomical, and it is affecting our family and our generations to come. So this is something that, while it may be dying, we still have to fight, I believe, with our last, to ensure that these corporations don't roll back, and in so doing, don't make it worse than it was for us before.
Absolutely. When we look at these graphs, for example, all of them, and we see that it's not Black Americans or Black people, period, that are in charge. But DEI is on a chopping block everywhere, in any aspect. Where are these people? Where's the 76.1%? Why are we not hearing from these people to say, hey, wait a minute, this is such an effective program. Don't chop it, don't cut it, don't make it illegal, don't ban it. Where are these voices? I mean, you guys are in charge here. You guys are in charge. Where's your voice now? I mean, so you can't have it both ways. You're in charge, and now that it's now that it's in the emergency room, okay, on life support, you guys are silent. So what are we really doing here? Dr. Nikki, and I'm happy to drop the link if you'd like to come in and chime in on this conversation. Doctor, you're welcome too. Anti-Blackness and microaggressions. And though even those can't be addressed, because there's something in the way. And so my question is, how do we get out of our own way? And I say our, meaning just people in general. How do we make DEI do what it is supposed to do? How do we fix this current situation?
Well, I'll respond with something that I recently read. And again, this is coming out of a higher ed industry where it's about repackaging it and calling it, like SEL.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm looking for what I recently had read, but so give me just a second here, but it's a way to be able to come back and repackage it. Shared equity leadership.
Okay.
Shared equity leadership. And so basically, this is a way to come back and focus on practices and policies and focus it there to try to change the paradigm. So like I was saying earlier, a lot of the inequities that are happening because there is no will and no need to be able to address those things that actually can get you better outcomes. And so this is, at least from what my understanding of this SEL is saying, we're just now going to talk about policy or kind of shift the paradigm towards policy. So it's repackaging. It's repackaging. So I'm not sure. I'm certainly keeping my eye on it. And I know even for the individual who is over our program was saying that, you know, she's ready to start having conversations with, you know, because of these audits and so on that are happening, because they are wanting to look at what are some of the things that you're trying to achieve and what are your outcomes. And so she's right now looking at ways to try to repackage, I guess I'm saying the word repackage, and present what we are doing, you know, as something a little bit different. So you're not so much, because the perception right now is that this is about people feeling uncomfortable and people feeling like you have an oppressor and an oppressor, but actually repackaging this to say, no, this is not people being oppressed, but this is about respect in the workplace. It's about fixing the inequities and looking at policy to get that started in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm going to say this to you, Gina. When you said repackaging, it made me think about how, especially if you like junk food, you know, they've done a lot of repackaging on that and on, you know, Oreo cookies and whatever. My grandkids like those. So when they repackage a product, the package looks different, and then the amount, the quantity is typically less than it was prior to the repackaging. So, I'm going to be honest with you. When I first started hearing about how DEI was heading towards the chopping block, I'm like, well, you know what? It doesn't matter, because you know, we could change the name. We can change the name. It's the content. It's the items, the issues per se is what is failing us. And I've often thought that we miss the mark with DEI. Well, at least I wonder, you know, when these companies like Coca-Cola and who is that makes the Aunt Jemima pancake mix or whatever? When these companies came out after the murder of George Floyd, you know, they were like, hey, we're committed and we want it and this and that, 2/3. I think what happened is the wrong people rushed in and secured these positions, and they ended up becoming a disruption in the passion at the time to honestly address the issues. So you have decision makers at the top that really, at least at that time, wanted change. And then you had people come in who just saw, you know, a bag, if you will, saw an opportunity to address their pet peeve, which was had nothing to do with George Floyd and all of those circumstances that, you know, make us go out into these streets and protest. So you had those people come in and get in between the decision makers and the people who should be the recipients. And so we're talking 3 years now with ineffective change, and I think we missed the mark. And I think that immediately set us up for failure. One of my biggest concerns, and I'm going to presume you guys are familiar with the situation that happened at Lockheed Martin way back in the day. Ketanji Brown, I think that's it. Ketanji Brown Jackson, I think is her name, oversaw that case and kind of fumbled the bag for the victims of the Lockheed Martin shooting. You know, I feel like with these legal measures that they're trying to implement now, that we are headed towards another Lockheed Martin type situation. Are you guys familiar with what happened at Lockheed Martin?
No, do you mind?
So, and I was going to run a video, but it's emotional, and I'll actually put the links to the video in the chat. What happened is there was a white man who just was racist. He did not like Black people, and he, the HR department was aware of it. Employees complained about it, and nothing was done. So he had to go to an equity. I think it was a diversity and ethics course at the time. This is before DEI, the phrase. And lo and behold, there was a Black lady that was teaching it, or facilitating it, and he didn't like something, and he went out to his car, and he came back in, and he killed a substantial number of people in the plant, and there was no surprise. So Primetime had gone to a shareholders meeting and spoke with the CEO there and asked him, say, well, do you tolerate this? And, the guy was like, well, no, we have a zero tolerance policy. And so the Primetime guy was like, well, if you have a zero tolerance policy, why was this guy allowed to continue his employment here at Lockheed Martin? And of course, the CEO was, well, it was just a one-off. We have a no tolerance policy, but it was just a one-off. And so, it's just another sweeping under the rug. And it's heinous. People lost their lives because someone did not like Black Americans. He called them the N-words. It was just his login password to his computer was white power or something like that. I mean, it was clear that he was racist. And either there was an inability or unwillfulness to address that concern. Now, and I think about it and made me wonder if the role had been reversed, at least color-wise, would they have taken swifter action? And then one last point is when you look at some of these positions on Indeed and Career Builder and Job, this and that, these job boards, the position descriptions are like, you have to show that you had X number of years in this role and made significant progress. And when I look at those, I'm like, well, wait a minute. What have you allowed to occur in your organization? And for how long have you allowed this to occur in your organization, to the point where that tells me what type of DEI person you really want working there? Do you really expect to make change? Is that what you really want? Are you guys clear on what I'm saying? Because I think I said a lot there.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack.
It is. It is. I'm sorry.
It is a lot to unpack. But as I do think about what you were just sharing about Lockheed Martin and the company's approach, tell me if I'm on the right track here, because there's a huge campaign, say here in New York State, to ban menthol cigarettes, right? Because the advertising has, for the last 60 years, been overwhelmingly targeted at Blacks. And to the point where we are, Blacks are maybe 82% users of menthol cigarettes. And now with e-cigarettes, with the emergence of that. So if you think about a company that produces menthol cigarettes, and then you go into their corporate structure and you find a DE&I division there, how genuine are they truly being? And who then is at the head of those companies to push out equity? Because guess what? Equity does become more than what's happening internally within the corporate structure, but also the socially responsible way in which that corporation acts in community with the whole world, right? And especially if it's a global company such as Lockheed Martin or one of the tobacco producing companies. Am I on the right track in terms of this divergence? And if they have been more proactive to preempt this type of tragedy at their facilities, we wouldn't have gotten there where lives were lost. Are we in the
Absolutely.
same?
Yes. And the biggest thing is that you have a policy in place. You have policies. But, and I think Dr. Nikki, who's popping off in the comments, helping along with the conversation, as you know, they have policies, but there were no teeth to them, because there's no way that you have a large Black population of employees and more than one. It should only be one person that comes to you and tells you that, hey, this guy's calling me the N-word. This guy's threatening me. This, that, and 2/3. That you don't that as an organization, you don't come in and fix that problem one way or another. But it was allowed to fester and grow. And it was only one guy, but I can't remember how many lives were lost, but one is too many when it's just due to racism, and when it's due to the company not saying, hey, look, we have a zero tolerance policy and we are going to enforce it. And so even now, this is making me think, I would like to see how many people lost their job during the same time frame at Lockheed Martin for a non-fatal policy that they may have broken. Okay, like maybe they were late, 10 times or whatever, or they messed up an order or something of that nature. And did they lose their job? Yet this guy was able to be as racist as he needed to be, wanted to be, repeatedly over a year. Okay, with people filing complaints, etc., and he never lost his job. He lost his life when he took his own life after he took the lives of all of the other Black Americans that were working there alongside him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Another thought that I have about that whole incident is, and that's California, which is supposed to be, one of the most progressive states, and actually leading when it comes to these type of efforts. So
Right.
when you think about it, I mean, that happened in California.
Right. Let me shout out this chat real quick, because I sure appreciate them all. Shout out to All About the Trees. Thanks for stopping by and showing support. YVOC, thank you for pulling up. Tansy, my sister Gang, thank you. One Pap, you're my favorite. You're always up in here, girl. I appreciate you so much. One Pap says, in my opinion, that was done to push the scale towards the Blacks again, taking the eye off the high usage of vaping in the white culture. No check and balance. Ever shame on that policy. Yeah. And that's in regard to the comment that you made, Dr. Deborah, about the vaping.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, and that's really a good point there, Pat, because when they want to laser focus an initiative that negatively impacts Black people, there's no miscommunication. There's no misunderstanding. They seem to be able to get it done fast and quick and error-free. But then when it comes to something, and I think Nikki had said something earlier in the comments, when it comes to something where it requires them to take the onus or the responsibility, all of a sudden it's like, well, give us time and we need to figure out, and back to the DEI piece, we've heard a lot about, where they'll say, individuals will say, well, this is a tough thing, and you have to give people the opportunity to let it sink in and let them come to terms with it, etc. And so that can take 100 years. 100 years. And so while we are trying to get them up to speed about our marginalization, our trauma, the disenfranchisement, the pay gaps, the position gaps, while we're giving them grace to come to terms with that. We're steady living through them, because until they change, this is our reality. And while we've done all of this grace giving, again, the lawsuits are there. The legislature is being written to do away with DEI, and these same people are not. I mean, mum's the word. So now are they trying to come to terms with that now? And then I also question, if they take DEI and make it illegal completely, what are they going to do about Americans with disabilities? Is that going to kind of slip through because it's not diversity, it's not equity, it's not inclusion, it's disabilities. It's disabilities. We can talk about that. You guys get what I'm saying? I'm being very cynical here, but
No, you're right. You're right. And I think like one pap
yeah.
said in their comments, it's like I'm from the deep south, and so we would say you throw a rock and you hide your hand. It's important, but we are also ignoring some issues happening over here in order to put a spotlight on this. And don't get me wrong, I don't want harmful effects from menthol or anything else to permeate our community, but there's always more. I think we have to just begin to say, well, what aren't they saying? What's being left out of the conversation? And as you were just saying, what then happens to members of the ADA community, those who are protected by the ADA, when there's so much focus on ensuring that we don't get the equity that we deserve? It also affects others, such as the ADA population. And we just have to, I don't know, we have to find a way to keep pushing to ensure that it doesn't just go away now that we're headed towards 5 years out from the murder of George Floyd, and the sentiment and the care and the concern expressed for the Black community is waning. We're about to have another national election for president next year. So much is shifting. We have to make sure that DEI doesn't get shifted right out of the equation.
Yeah, I think what I think is that instead of trying to change it from the top down, that the approach needs to be from the bottom up. Because I think that if we get the employees more involved, not, hey, you guys, come here and sit down and listen to me talk about something that I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm too afraid to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. You guys come on in here and listen to me babble about it. Instead of doing that, we need to have employees come in and say, okay, what do you need to make this place pop? What do you need to make this good? And then let the decision makers, based on what that information ends up being, then let them make a decision. Because right now it's so many theoretical approaches and we'll see and this and that. I mean, it doesn't address. And because there's this fear or inability or unwillingness to discuss the real topics, that we never get to it. And another comment that Nikki made when she's talking about strategies and assessments, you're absolutely right. And here's the thing with assessment plans. When you go to create these assessments, the decision makers have to say, well, yeah, I do. I want to know. And I'm saying this, I agree with what you're saying, Dr. Nikki. And again, when you put it in the hands of the decision makers, they have to want it. Because if you say, okay, well, what's the problem that you're having here at your organization? Well, the people are this and won't do that. And the survey results show this, that, and 2/3. And as an evaluator, if you go in, you say, well, let's look at this and see where the issues are. Well, you don't need to look at that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't look at that. So again, if they aren't willing to buy into the areas that need to be assessed, you still won't be able to uncover the problem. And so I think the approach needs to be different. We need to do it from the bottom up, because and in that that's where you're going to get your truth. That's where you're going to find out about the guy who went and killed everybody, or that substantial number of people in Lockheed Martin. That's where you're going to find out where the chief complaints about the Black women who are underpaid, and even the white women who, when they compare themselves to the white men, that they're not getting paid. This is where the real conversation, you won't be able to ignore those facts, because now you're hearing it direct from the people, as opposed to trying to tell the people something that the people in charge aren't even capable of leading the discussion on.
And if you don't mind, Mel, I'd like to add, because I'm listening to what you were saying and I'm unpacking this. And I think a lot of that has to do with the industry and maybe even the region. Because I know I'm here in the Midwest, and this is a very conservative area. And we have tried the bottom-up approach. And the bottom-up approach is very difficult because there's no accountability coming from leaders. And if leaders aren't being held accountable, meaning again, they report to somebody too. So if there's no incentive, then it makes it harder. That remains a barrier. Now, in higher ed, of course, your student body, serves as a means of accountability. So once, like I'm thinking back to George Floyd, and once the students rallied, did some protesting and made some noise, that's what caused the reaction of these DE&I, being ramped up, and, and my job, changed somewhat. And many of the other jobs across campus changed. But we're getting away from George Floyd. And so it's kind of like things are kind of like defaulting back. And now you have this extra layer or element, I should say, of concern, with this national sentiment now kind of taking steam of cutting DE&I. So it's kind of like laying low. So when it comes to accountability from the leaders, to me, what seemed to work was actually having the students out there and really pushing it forward. That seemed to be the only way that we were able to make any traction, or even to be able to even get any type of discussion started. So I do believe that has a lot to do with it. Not necessarily, bottom up, but maybe the constituency, or, again, if it's a private corporation, customer base, or somebody there where they feel that there is going to be some sort of repercussion if they don't make changes.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Go ahead, Doctor.
Mel, I just wanted to throw a question out there, because we do know that major organizations host DEI conferences. But to your point about from the bottom up, maybe in considering what Gina just shared also, and I saw the same, Gina, what if small communities such as ourselves, had our own conferences? I feel that we continuously seek to be a part of those that are designed to speak about the things that really mean a lot to us. Well, maybe the bottom-up approach would be then inviting some of those corporate leaders and their assigned people, who are Black people, of course, or other people who are stakeholders, rather than that 80%, because we do know that we're going to hear the violins when they come. But if we want to see true change, we need to get them in a setting where we are able, those people who are at the bottom, to voice our concerns, set the tone for the conference, and have them respond, instead of us hearing what they have presented or have scheduled for our hearing, and then we respond. I just think if we flip it or even consider flipping these scenarios, sometimes we won't leave these conferences feeling like, oh, wow, nothing's going to change and it's just going to fade away. But if we lead them ourselves, if we develop them and invite those who we desire to speak to our concerns, I think it may garner some results, not all results, but some of the results that we intend. What do you think about that? I don't mean to take over your spot as the interviewer.
Girl, listen, no, absolutely. No, that is a great idea because it has to change. I mean, listen, they can outlaw DEI all day. They can outlaw it all day. It's not going to remove the problem, and we'll come up with another name. And I'm going to be honest with you, DEI really doesn't fit the issue specific to Black people anyway. So it should be called another name anyway. And when you look at DEI, it's so vague and broad that it allows the inattention towards specifically issues that impact Black people, period. So I don't care if they change the name. They can outlaw it all day. Fine, go ahead and outlaw it. That all right, if that's what you say. But that we will still rise because as long as the issue's there, we're not going to roll over. So yeah, but I agree with that approach. And those that do show up, those who are invited need to be people who can't have the conversation. And, I feel like these are the type of things we need to call out. Hey, I'm sorry, but this is not a great way to lead this conversation because you're not touching on the things that we're here to talk about. You know what I mean? And so why don't you have a seat and let's let somebody who, even though they may not look like you, or they may not have the same credentials as you, they are more qualified to lead this part of the discussion than you. So be open enough to have a seat and let's get done what we came here to do, type of thing. And we have to be able to say that, and people have to be able to receive that and not get in the way of that, so as to not disrupt the flow towards change. And I want to ask you guys, should white people just get out of the way when it comes to DEI? Should they really just sit down and watch? I mean, I'm not saying they should or shouldn't, but I'm just wondering what your guys' thoughts are. Should they get out of the way when it comes to DEI? What are your thoughts?
Out of the way in terms of leading, or just
in terms of leading, in terms of this, because shouldn't that number be changed up a little bit? I mean, even Hispanic and Latino, 7.8%. And who is this unknown 3.9%? Is that, that's probably, who is that? So in terms of these statistics, should they sit down or should they acquiesce their role right now? And because at this point, to me, DEI has not been a success just based on those numbers and based on the fact that it's in court and there's laws against it.
I do think they should. I think they should sit this one out, because if you go deeper into those numbers, we start extrapolating down, we'll see that there hasn't been incredible change in terms of the upward mobility of Blacks. I think those numbers are really, really telling, and they reflect the country. And so, yes, if there is to be a true sense and desire to make internal changes within these corporate structures, then definitely these numbers have to be flipped. And we almost don't register like those others who we are unsure who they are. So yes, I don't know if they all have to completely exit, but I certainly believe that those numbers need to be flipped to give us greater representation.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like I said, my perspective is a little different because just where I'm coming from, I tend to see more people who look like me that are doing the work with lots of frustration as well. But I think one of the other dynamics to look at it as is, you talked about DEI work, and I think what's happening is that you do have some, especially in higher ed, that are calling it DEIA, and they're adding the A in there for anti-racism. And so with anti-racism, that's where you have those particular trainings about these issues that we're trying to actually get to the heart of the matter on, inequities, things that have happened systemically to Black people, and eradicating those things. So I just thought about that, that's a different dynamic, and in which case we would be the most, I think, effective and impactful individuals to be leading these programs.
And I agree with that. I agree with that. And that's, you've got your DEIA, DEIG, DEIA, blah, blah, blah. I mean, DEI alphabet soup, and I think that is problematic as well, only because, people jump in and say, oh, good, DEI. Oh, well, let me throw a DEIS for shoe. And then I'll go ahead and just take the role as the chief diversity officer, and I'll focus on shoes. And it's like, so we get all the way away from the initial intent and purpose. And I personally think that all those extras, the A, the G, the whatever, and I don't know what any of the letters, the extra letters stand for. I'm just throwing them out there. But my point is that maybe we need to kind of run this clock back and say, look, we are going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, period. Because if we can grasp what those truly mean, and if we can grasp what they truly mean and get to the foundation of it, because the only reason why this is an issue is because of, it's a black-white thing. It is a black-white thing. And if we can get into that piece of it and get, not even change your mind, because, we can't, I think we can influence people to modify their behavior. We can influence people to say, you know what, I can see how my behavior affects this individual here, so I'm going to stop doing that. Or even if we can influence policies that if we can't influence behavior willfully, then we can influence behavior from a policy standpoint, which is, I have to stop doing this, because if I go in here and call these people the N-word one more time, using the Lockheed Martin situation as an example, if I go in here and do that one more time, I'm going to lose my job. So one way or the other, I think if we hone into the core of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we get that squared away, then that can be branched out to every marginalized scenario that exists today. Period, point blank. That's where I think that's one of the other thing that I think we need to do. So I don't know what you ladies think about that. I want to shout out everybody that pulled up today. We're almost getting ready to wrap up. Dr. Nikki, thank you so much for contributing in the comments, girl. You sure did help a lot with the conversation. Shout out to Sir Miguel. Good morning to you. And we sure appreciate you. One Pap, we always appreciate you pulling up, girl. So ladies, I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you guys think before we cut out?
Well, I want to thank you first for having this discussion. I'm so happy, and I was happy to have been asked, because it is something that we really need to pay close attention to. To try to answer your question, I think it is, and I love Gina's unique perspective, because she mentions the struggle of those who look like us, who are actually working in this area. So they're trying to kill those who should be working and leading in this area by the pushback. what I believe is that the corporations really need to do their own autopsy on themselves and get beyond that knee-jerk reaction that led them to infuse more funds into this area without really considering the outcomes or even thinking about what those outcomes should be. I think it has been a disservice to this concentration known as diversity in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for those of us who desire it and desperately need it, because this really goes beyond where we are today, right? It goes beyond that. And we are trying to establish something for the generations that will come behind us. It is imperative, I believe, that we get it right now. And I think we have to keep pushing. So I'm here with you as you continue to brainstorm and think about how best we can do that. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. And Gina, any last words or thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. And I would like to thank you for including me in the conversation as well, because there's so much, when it comes to this topic. And, we probably could stay for another 5 or 6 hours to talk about this. But there's nothing that wasn't already said that I just really just can't check off on in agreement. But it's a problem. Again, when we talk about overall looking at the statistics and why aren't we, or, other people of color, I guess, when you look at those numbers in that statistic box, leading these programs, that is something to really think about. What's the gap there? Why aren't we getting there? And moreover, that compensation. But, at the end of the day, I believe, it is about the power structure, and that's what needs to be dismantled and rebuilt. And that's the reason why we have to have DE&I to begin with. So it's almost like, you have to fix a problem before you can fix a problem type of thing. But I have enjoyed being here, talking with you, Mel, and Dr. Deborah, and I thank Dr. Nikki for what she added as well. She mentioned strategy, and absolutely that strategy ties into what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? How are you going to measure it? And I believe a lot of it has to do with accountability, leadership accountability. And who are our leaders, or these corporations? Who are they being held accountable to? So again, going back to, I believe they need to be incentivized. You make these changes or else you lose customers, you lose money, which is your bottom line. I think once that pressure is applied, then we'll start to see what I would call, effective and impactful change. So Mel, thank you for having me. And I would love to continue these discussions with you and Dr. Deborah.
Certainly. No, ladies, I appreciate you guys so much. I do want to say, and also Dr. Deborah Jenkins said to shout you out there, Dr. Nikki, because you've made some awesome contributions to the conversation as well, and try to make sure that you get the link in the chat the next time in order for you to come in and because appreciate everything that you've added to the discussion. I just want to say a couple of things here. I have another channel. It's called the Jedi Group. And that link is pinned to the top of the chat. That's typically where I want to start having these conversations. But I just came over here because, I know some folks over here that, that's why I came over here. So if you guys can subscribe to that YouTube channel that's pinned to the link, that's where more of these conversations are going to occur. And I do want to thank Dr. Deborah Jenkins, Gina Bourne. I appreciate the two of you for coming up and having this conversation. It's a tough conversation to have, but I think you ladies really helped to facilitate a great one. Thank you, Dr. Nikki. And also, I'm going to put it's a 2-part YouTube video about the Lockheed Martin. As soon as we wrap up here, I'll go ahead and put the links to that in the description box as well. And then, because it's, that's a sad case. And then when they finally did, they won the case. The survivors sued, they won, but then Ketanji Brown fumbled the settlement agreement. And so they've lost their loved ones and lost the financial cure, if you will, for lack of a better term. So, ladies, thanks again. Appreciate you so much. Appreciate you for pulling up. That's it. That is the podcast. You guys be sure to like, share, subscribe, Replay Gang, leave a comment because I want to hear from you. And until next time, y'all, we will see you when we see you. Welcome to the Only Male Cruise Show, the We Own Your Head podcast. Discussing topics that make you say, how and where can we improve as a society? From a Black American's perspective. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Catch us live, be ready to speak. This is a call-in show. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, Replay Gang, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. Let's go to work.